Commander Jiwon stood at the window of the spacecraft and looked outside. The stars were bright and beautiful, but she was not thinking about their beauty. She was thinking about the weapon they had built. The railgun floated in space between Mars and Jupiter. It looked like a long metal skeleton with wires and giant batteries attached to it. 15 years of work had gone into building this machine. 30 seconds until we fire, said Diho from his station. He was the weapons officer. His hands moved quickly over the glowing screens in front of him. Everything looks good. The target asteroid is locked in our sights. Jiwon nodded. She remembered how the aliens had laughed at them. The Galactic Council was a group of powerful alien species who controlled most of the galaxy. When humans asked permission to test their new weapon, the aliens thought it was funny. They used plasma guns and gravity weapons and bombs made from strange matter that bent space itself. Humanity wanted to use a simple railgun, just a metal bullet shot very fast using magnets. The aliens thought humans were primitive and stupid. 10 seconds, Daeho called out. The batteries are fully charged. Ready to fire. Fire when ready, Jiwon said. Her voice was calm, but her heart was beating fast. The moment came. The railgun fired. There was no bright flash like in the movies. There was no loud explosion. The tungsten bullet just left the gun. It accelerated to 30% of the speed of light in less than 1 kilometer. That was incredibly fast. The bullet crossed the empty space and hit the asteroid in seconds. The asteroid was called Charlie 7. It was 3 kilometers wide and made of nickel and iron. It was a big chunk of rock and metal floating in space. When the bullet hit it, something amazing happened. The asteroid did not just break apart. It did not explode into big pieces. It simply vanished. The energy from the impact was so powerful that it turned the entire asteroid into hot gas. The rock and metal vaporized instantly. One moment there was an asteroid. The next moment there was only an expanding cloud of glowing vapor. Impact confirmed, Daeho whispered. His eyes were wide with shock. The target is gone. Completely destroyed. Hyejin was the scientist on the ship. She stared at her computer screens. Numbers and graphs covered the displays. The energy reading cannot be right, she said. We just delivered the same power as a strategic antimatter bomb. But we only used electricity and a metal slug. Jiwon smiled a little. Send all the test data to the Galactic Council monitoring station. Give them everything. Full transparency like they asked for. What Jiwon did not know was that more than just the Council was watching. On 17 different alien worlds, military experts were looking at the same numbers. They were all doing the same math in their heads. And they were all reaching the same scary conclusion. Humanity had just created the most cost-effective weapon ever seen in the galaxy. A plasma lance weapon on an alien ship cost billions to build. It required rare materials from dying stars. It needed exotic technology that took decades to understand. The human railgun cost almost nothing by comparison. It was just metal, magnets, and electricity. Any species with basic technology could build one. But the damage it caused was just as terrible as the expensive alien weapons. The alien military analysts started making calculations. How many railguns could humanity build? How fast could they make them? How much would each one cost? The answers terrified them. For the same price as one alien battleship, humans could build 1,000 railguns, maybe more. Back on the spacecraft, the crew celebrated quietly. They had passed the weapons test. They could now apply to join the galactic military community. They thought this was a good day. They thought they had proven that humanity could stand with the other species. They had no idea that they had just changed everything. Across the galaxy, alien empires were looking at humanity with new eyes, not with respect, not with friendship, with fear. The kind of fear that comes when someone realizes the rules of the game have suddenly changed. When someone realizes that everything they thought they knew about warfare is now outdated. The Velkari Concordat had ruled part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. Their plasma lance battleships were considered the finest weapons in space. Now they were wondering if those weapons were about to become obsolete. The Three-Nod Collective had gravity manipulation technology that could crush planets. But their weapons took years to build and cost enormous amounts of money. Human railguns took months to build and cost almost nothing. The Quilox dynasty was the oldest species in the Council. They had seen civilizations rise and fall. They had witnessed the birth of new technologies and the death of old empires. They looked at humanity's test and saw something that frightened them more than any war. They saw efficiency, pure brutal efficiency. In warfare, the side that can replace its weapons faster usually wins. It does not matter if your weapon is slightly better if your enemy has 10 times as many. The aliens had forgotten this simple truth. They had spent centuries making their weapons more and more complex, more powerful, more sophisticated, but also more expensive and harder to build. Humans had gone the opposite direction. They had made something simple, something cheap, something that anyone could build quickly. And it worked just as well. Jiwan looked out at the cloud of vapor that used to be an asteroid. She felt proud of what they had accomplished. But deep in her mind, a small worry was forming. She wondered how the aliens would react to this. She wondered if they would see humanity as equals now, or as threats. The answer would come soon enough. Already, messages were being sent across the galaxy. Emergency meetings were being called. Military budgets were being frozen while advisors recalculated everything. Warships that had been on patrol were being ordered back to home systems, not to attack, to defend. Because in one moment, with one test firing, humanity had accidentally ended an age. The age when technological superiority meant military dominance. The age when only the richest and most advanced species could afford to wage war. That age was over now. A new age was beginning. An age where any species with basic technology could defend itself. Where even small colonies could afford devastating weapons. Where the cost of invasion would always exceed the value of conquest. Humanity had fired its first railgun, and every alien empire in the galaxy had fallen silent, not in awe. In calculation! They were all doing the same math, and none of them liked the answer. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council happened fast. Only 6 hours after the human test, representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy gathered. Ambassador Minho stood in the center of a huge room. Around him were holographic images of aliens from dozens of different worlds. Some looked like insects, some looked like clouds of gas, some looked like things humans had no words to describe. Minho had expected questions, maybe some concerns about humanity developing weapons. He had prepared answers about how humans wanted peace and just wanted to defend themselves. But when he looked around the room, he saw something he did not expect. Complete silence. None of the aliens were speaking. They were all just staring at him. The Velkari representative was there. Her species looked like tall, thin humanoids with silver skin. They had controlled a large part of the galaxy for thousands of years. Their plasma weapons were famous. Their military was considered the strongest. But now she was just staring at Minho with an expression he could not read. The Threnod were also present. They did not have bodies like humans. They were beings made of organized gravitational fields. They communicated through vibrations in space-time. Their weapons could collapse stars or stretch planets apart, but even they were silent. Honorable members, Minho began. He felt uncomfortable with all the staring. According to Article 7 of the Technological Advancement Protocols, humanity submits the results of our weapons certification test. We believe our railgun technology meets the minimum standards for... Minimum standards? The Velkari representative finally spoke. Her voice sounded strange. The translator in Minho's ear told him she was barely controlling alarm. Ambassador, do you understand what you have created? A kinetic weapon system, Minho said carefully. He was confused by her reaction. It is primitive compared to your plasma technology, perhaps, but primitive? The Threnod delegate interrupted. Their voice made the air vibrate. You accelerated matter to 0.3 light speed, in a straight line, with no exotic matter, no dimensional folding, no graviton manipulation, Minho nodded. He still did not understand why they seemed so upset. Yes, is there a problem with the energy cost, said the Kilox representative. The Quilox looked like large beetles with 17 mouths. All 17 mouths were quivering. Provide your energy consumption data, right now. Still confused, Minho sent the technical specifications to everyone in the room. The information showed how much power the railgun used, how much it cost to fire, how long it took to recharge, basic engineering data. The silence that followed was even worse than before. Minho watched as the alien representatives looked at the numbers. He saw their reactions, shock, disbelief, and something that looked like fear. Back on Earth, a young analyst named Soman was monitoring the meeting. She also watched financial data from across the galaxy. She noticed something strange happening. Every major alien empire had just frozen their military budget. They had not increased spending. They had not cut spending. They had just stopped, frozen everything, like they all needed time to think. At the council meeting, the Velkari representative spoke again. Her tone was different now, more respectful, but also worried. 1/10 the energy cost of a plasma lance, 1/100th the manufacturing complexity of a graviton beam, and you can fire it from a platform that cost... She paused. She was checking the data again as if she could not believe it. Less than we spend on a single fighter craft. The Quilox delegates' 17 mouths all spoke at once, creating a chorus of worried voices. You can build 1,000 of these for the cost of one of our dreadnoughts. 1,000 weapons, each one capable of destroying a capital ship in a single hit. Finally, Minho understood. The aliens were not angry. They were not insulted. They were terrified. Humanity had not just built a new weapon. Humanity had changed the economics of warfare. A Velkari battleship took years to build and cost more money than some planets produced in a decade. A human railgun took months to build and cost less than a wealthy person's house. The council, the Velkari began slowly, choosing her words very carefully, acknowledges humanity's successful certification. This session is adjourned. The holographic images disappeared. Minho was left alone in the center of the room. His communicator immediately started beeping with urgent calls from Earth. The military wanted to talk to him. The diplomatic corps wanted explanations. Intelligence services wanted to know what happened, because something big was happening across the galaxy. Every alien warship from every major power had just changed course. They were all going home, back to their own solar systems, into defensive positions around their home worlds. Minho slowly understood what this meant. The aliens were scared, not of humanity's current military strength. Humans only had one railgun platform, but they were scared of what humanity could build. In the time it took the Velkari to build one new battleship, humanity could build 10,000 railguns. Maybe more. Warfare in the galaxy had always been about technological advancement. The species with the best technology won wars. The species with the most complex weapons dominated others. It had been this way for thousands of years. Millions of years, maybe. Humans had just proven that complexity was not always better. Sometimes simple was superior, especially when simple was cheap and easy to mass produce. Minho sat down in the empty council chamber. He realized that humanity had accidentally become one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, not through superior technology, not through ancient wisdom, through basic economics and simple physics. The aliens were going home to think, to recalculate, to figure out what this new reality meant. Because suddenly none of them knew the rules anymore. A species that was barely 200 years into space travel had just made their 1,000-year-old military doctrines obsolete. Minho wondered what would happen next. Would the aliens want to be friends with humanity? Would they want to trade? Or would they see humanity as a threat that needed to be eliminated before humans could build too many railguns? He was about to find out. Because while most of the galaxy was going into defensive positions, one empire was doing something different. The Malgrath Dominion was not retreating. They were not scared. They were angry, and they were preparing for war. 3 weeks after the test, the offers started coming. Every major power in the galaxy wanted the same thing. They wanted humanity's railgun technology, and they wanted humanity to promise never to mass-produce the weapons. The bribes were incredible. Captain Yuna sat in her quarters on the UNS Defiant. This was humanity's first real warship. It was currently near Saturn testing its systems. Yuna was reading through the offers on her computer screen. The numbers were hard to believe. The Velkari offered 6 star systems to humanity. 6 entire solar systems with planets and resources, just for the railgun designs and a promise not to build too many. The Three-Nod proposed a technology exchange. They would give humanity advanced science that would push human civilization forward by hundreds of years. The Quilox were more direct. They offered raw materials, enough metal and rare elements to build a Dyson sphere around the sun. They are terrified, said Tajin. He was the chief engineer on the Defiant. He was looking at the same offers in the next room. Look at the timeline clauses. They want manufacturing restrictions in place within 60 days. We scared them, Yuna said quietly. She looked out the window at Saturn's beautiful rings. Not because railguns are the ultimate weapon. Any of their technologies could probably beat railguns with time and research. But we showed them something they forgot was possible. What's that? Tajin asked. Efficiency. They have been building weapons by adding complexity for so long they forgot the basic rule of war. The side that can replace losses faster usually wins. Lieutenant Jiho was the tactical officer. He pulled up a holographic comparison chart. A single Velkari battleship takes 3 years to build. It requires exotic matter harvested from neutron stars. We can build a railgun platform in 6 months using materials from asteroids. The math is brutal. Yuna nodded slowly. They are not offering us bribes. They are trying to prevent an arms race they know they will lose. An urgent alert interrupted them. Director Yunji from Earth Strategic Command appeared on the screen. She looked worried. Very worried. Captain Yuna, we have a problem. The Malgrath Dominion has rejected the galactic consensus. They are not offering us anything. They are giving us an ultimatum. Yuna felt her stomach twist. She knew about the Malgrath. Everyone did. They were the most aggressive species in the galaxy. For 2,000 years, they had maintained their empire through overwhelming force and absolute ruthlessness. They did not negotiate. They conquered. What are their terms? Yuna asked, though she already suspected the answer. Surrender all railgun technology and blueprints within 30 days. If we refuse, they will consider it an act of preparation for war. They are mobilizing their fleet right now, Taijin cursed quietly. They are not trying to prevent an arms race. They are trying to start a war before we can build enough railguns to defend ourselves. How long until we have a functional defensive grid? Yuna asked. 6 months. Maybe 8. Not 30 days. Yuna stood up. She straightened her uniform. Now she understood why the other alien powers had made such generous offers. They were not afraid of humanity starting a war. They were afraid of being caught in the middle when someone else started one. The Malgrath were going to attack humanity, and if humanity had enough railguns by then, the war would be devastating for everyone nearby. Recall all our ships to the Sol system, and get me Commander Jiwan. We need to talk about production schedules. Immediately. Outside the window, Saturn continued its slow rotation. Somewhere beyond, the Malgrath fleet was already moving toward human space. They were confident in their technological superiority. They had defeated dozens of species over the centuries. They thought humans would be easy prey. They were about to learn something important. In war, it is not always about having the best weapon. It is about having enough weapons, and having the will to use them. The Malgrath had thousands of years of military tradition. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They had soldiers who had trained their entire lives for battle. But humans had something the Malgrath had forgotten was important. Humans had factories. Humans had raw materials everywhere in their solar system. And humans had a very simple weapon that was very easy to build quickly. Yuna started making calls. Every shipyard in the Sol system was about to go into emergency production mode. Every factory was about to switch to making railgun platforms. Every mine on every moon and asteroid was about to increase output. Earth had 30 days to prepare for war. 30 days to build as many weapons as possible. It would not be enough to match the Malgrath fleet in numbers, but it might be enough to make the Malgrath regret their decision to attack. Because the Malgrath were thinking about war in the old way, the way where both sides bring their fleets and fight until one side loses. Humans were about to show them a new way. A way where you do not bring all your weapons to one place. A way where your weapons are scattered throughout your entire territory. Small, hard to find, cheap to build, but each one deadly. The Malgrath were bringing an invasion force. Humans were turning their entire solar system into a weapon. Every moon, every asteroid, every piece of space debris. Anywhere they could hide a railgun platform and a sensor system. The aliens had forgotten something important about humanity. Humans had fought wars on their home planet for thousands of years. They knew about asymmetric warfare. They knew about guerrilla tactics. They knew that sometimes the best way to fight a powerful enemy was not to meet them in direct battle. It was to make the cost of winning higher than the value of victory. The Malgrath fleet was coming. They expected an easy conquest. They were about to discover that conquering a species that had just figured out how to make war cheap was the most expensive mistake they could make. Yuna looked at the production schedules appearing on her screen. 3,000 railgun platforms in 30 days. It would take every factory working around the clock. It would take every resource humanity could spare. But it was possible. Barely possible. Get to work, she said to her crew. We have a war to prepare for. The Malgrath Armada arrived 53 days after their ultimatum. They entered the Sol system near Neptune expecting to find humans paralyzed with fear. What they found made their fleet admiral question everything he knew about warfare. Admiral, Kangman watched from the command deck of the UNS Retribution. The Malgrath force appeared out of hyperspace near Neptune's orbit. 300 warships. Each one was massive and covered with weapons. Each one represented centuries of military technology. Together, they had enough firepower to destroy a dozen civilizations. Against them, humanity had assembled what the Malgrath must have thought was a pathetic defense. 72 ships of various sizes. Most of them were civilian vessels hastily converted into warships. No massive dreadnoughts. No reality-bending superweapons. Just ships with railguns. Receiving their ultimatum now, said Communications Officer Soyan. Standard Malgrath terms. Unconditional surrender or complete destruction. They are giving us 1 hour to respond. Kangman smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Tell them we need the full hour to think about their generous offer. That should give us the time we need. Because the Malgrath had made a critical mistake. They assumed humanity's defense was limited to the visible ships. They had not accounted for the 3,000 railgun platforms humanity had scattered throughout the outer solar system. Small platforms, running on minimal power, nearly invisible against the background radiation of space. Each one was cold and silent and waiting. Each platform carried only a single projectile, but each projectile carried the kinetic force of a strategic nuclear weapon. 3,000 platforms meant 3,000 shots, and the Malgrath fleet had 300 ships. Enemy fleet is holding position near Neptune, said Tactical Officer Junho. They are not advancing, probably scanning us, trying to understand our deployment. Let them scan, Kangman said. Weapon stations begin calculating firing solutions. I want targeting data on every ship in their fleet. Prioritize the big ones first. Throughout the Sol system, on every human ship and platform, crews worked with calm efficiency. Not because they were experienced veterans. Most of them had been civilians 6 months ago. But because operating a railgun was fundamentally simple, point at target, charge the batteries, pull the trigger, no exotic particles to stabilize, no dimensional calculations, no quantum mechanics to worry about, just basic physics that humans had understood since Newton walked the Earth. The hour ticked down. The Malgrath admiral, whose name was Velcroth, grew impatient. Humans were obviously just delaying and hoping for a miracle. Foolish creatures. He opened a communication channel to threaten them one more time. Humans, your time expires. Surrender your weapons and technology, or we will fire all platforms, Kangman said quietly. What happened next would be studied by military historians for the next 1,000 years. 3,000 platforms scattered across millions of cubic kilometers of space, fired at exactly the same moment. 3,000 tungsten projectiles, each weighing 10 kilograms, each accelerated to 30% of the speed of light. The Malgrath point defense systems were excellent. They had been refined over centuries. They were designed to intercept plasma bolts, gravity beams, and antimatter missiles, weapons that glowed with energy signatures, weapons that moved at speeds that gave defenders time to react, weapons that could be seen coming. Railgun projectiles did none of these things. They were cold metal moving at relativistic speeds. They did not give off energy that sensors could easily detect. And by the time the Malgrath sensors registered them, the physics of light delay meant the projectiles had already hit. 273 Malgrath warships died in the first volley. Not damaged, not disabled, destroyed. Each kinetic impact released energy measured in megatons. The projectiles punched through shields designed to stop energy weapons like they were paper. Hulls that could withstand plasma fire vaporized instantly. Reactors exploded. Atmosphere vented into space in brief, brilliant flashes of light. In less than 10 seconds, humanity had eliminated 90% of the Malgrath invasion force. 10 seconds. 10 seconds to destroy 2,000 years of military supremacy. Kangman watched the tactical display update in real time. He felt no joy in the destruction, only grim satisfaction that the defense had worked. Cease fire. Open a channel to the surviving ships. On the screen, Commander Velcroth's face appeared. His species looked like reptiles with multiple eyes. All of his eyes were wide with shock. Behind him, his bridge was chaos. Officers were shouting, alarms were blaring, fires were burning. "Commander," Kangman said quietly and calmly, "you came here to teach us about power. Let me teach you about mathematics. You have 27 ships left. We have 3,000 more railgun platforms loaded and ready to fire. We have 72 warships, and we have manufacturing facilities that can produce 10,000 more projectiles before your reinforcements could possibly arrive. Do you understand these numbers?" Velcroth said nothing. What could he say? His empire's mighty fleet had been destroyed in seconds, by weapons so simple that any species could build them, by a civilization that was barely 200 years into space travel. "Go home," Kangman continued. His voice was hard. "Tell your empire what happened here. Tell the entire galaxy. Humanity did not want this war. You forced it on us. And now everyone will know the price of that mistake. We are not conquerors, but we will defend ourselves. And we have made defense very, very affordable." The surviving Malgrath ships jumped to hyperspace 17 minutes later. They fled the system that was supposed to have been an easy conquest. They fled in shame and terror, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic politics. Word of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The Malgrath Dominion, undefeated for 2,000 years, had been crushed by a species that did not even have faster-than-light travel yet. Crushed not by superior technology but by superior production and simpler physics. In the aftermath, Chief Engineer Hieron stood in the manufacturing facility on Luna. She watched automated systems assemble more railgun platforms. "We did not win because we were stronger," she said to her assistant. "We won because we could afford to lose. Every weapon they fired cost them resources they cannot easily replace. Every projectile we fired cost us basically nothing. Metal and electricity. That is all." It was a lesson the galaxy had forgotten over millennia of increasingly complex warfare. Sometimes the simple solution, executed overwhelmingly, beats sophisticated elegance every single time. Sometimes cheap and plentiful beats expensive and powerful. The Battle of Sol changed everything. It proved that any species with basic technology could now defend itself against even the most powerful empires. It proved that the age of conquest through technological superiority was over. It proved that in the new era of warfare, economics mattered more than sophistication, and it proved that humanity, despite being young and relatively primitive by galactic standards, understood something fundamental about conflict that the older species had forgotten. War is not about who has the best weapons. War is about who can afford to keep fighting longer. And humanity had just made warfare affordable for everyone. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Ambassador Minho stood before the Galactic Council again. But this time, everything was different. The chamber was full of species that had never attended before. Minor powers, frontier colonies, species that had been considered too primitive for galactic politics. They were all there to hear what humanity had to say. The Council recognizes Ambassador Minho of Earth, the Velkari representative announced. Her tone was completely different from their first meeting. It was respectful now. Cautious. "You have requested this session to address the situation following recent events." Minho nodded. He stood in the central speaking circle, but he was not alone this time. With him were representatives from 14 other species. Species that had contacted humanity after the Malgrath defeat. Species that had been subjugated, marginalized, or ignored by the major powers for centuries. "I am here to discuss the Railgun Proliferation Treaty," Minho began. He watched several council members physically react to those words. Some leaned back. Some leaned forward. All of them were suddenly very alert. "As you all know," Minho continued, "every major power in the galaxy has requested or demanded that humanity restrict production and distribution of railgun technology." The Three-Knot delegates' gravitational field rippled with anticipation. "And have you reached a decision regarding these requests?" "Yes," Minho said simply. "We are going to share it. With everyone who wants it." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Delegates shouted questions. Some demanded explanations. A few even made threats about sanctions or military action. The room was pandemonium. Chief Scientist Hyejin appeared as a hologram from Earth. She raised her hand and waited for silence. Eventually, the shouting died down. "Let me explain the mathematics," Hyejin said calmly. "The Malgrath War proved something important. Weapons complexity creates strategic vulnerability. Every empire here has built its military on expensive, sophisticated technologies that take years to produce and require rare resources." She displayed a comparison chart. Several delegates looked uncomfortable when they saw the numbers. Humanity's defensive grid now has 15,000 railgun platforms. At current production rates, we can build 1,000 more per month. For the cost of a single Valkyrie battleship, we can build enough platforms to defend 3 entire star systems. "You are threatening us," the Queelox representative said accusingly. "Building an overwhelming force to share," interrupted Colonel Sangwoo. He was the commander of humanity's defense forces. "With anyone who wants it, free of charge." The chamber erupted again, this time in confusion rather than anger. Aliens looked at each other. They whispered to their advisors. They could not understand what humanity was saying. Minyo waited for quiet before continuing. "Here is the new reality. We cannot stop other species from developing railgun technology. The physics are too simple. The engineering too basic. Within 5 years, someone else will figure it out independently. Within 10 years, everyone will have figured it out. So instead of hoarding a temporary advantage," added Specialist Jisoo from humanity's diplomatic corps, "we are getting ahead of the inevitable. We are distributing the technology under a treaty framework that benefits everyone." The terms of the Railgun Proliferation Treaty were elegant in their simplicity. Any species could receive the technology for free, but they had to agree to 3 binding conditions. First, railguns could only be used for defensive purposes. Neutral observers would verify compliance. Second, the technology could not be modified or weaponized beyond the basic specifications without unanimous council approval. Third, any species that violated the first 2 terms would face collective action from all treaty signatories. "You are trying to democratize warfare," the Valkyrie representative said slowly. Understanding was dawning in her voice. "Make it impossible for any single power to maintain military dominance through technological superiority." "We are trying to make wars too expensive to fight," Minho corrected her. "When everyone has access to the same devastating defensive capabilities, the calculus changes. Invasion becomes economically impossible. The cost of attack always exceeds the potential gain." A representative from a minor species spoke up hesitantly. Her people had been under Malgrath rule for 3 centuries. "And species like ours? You would genuinely share this technology with us, even though we have nothing to offer you in return?" "Especially with you," Minho replied firmly. "Because the only way this works is if everyone is protected. If even the smallest colony can defend itself, then the age of conquest is over. No empire can afford to subjugate others when those others can destroy your invasion fleet." The debate lasted for 3 days. Representatives argued about the details. They worried about the implications. They questioned humanity's motives. But in the end, the logic was inescapable. The technology was simple enough that it could not be contained. Someone would rediscover it. Better to distribute it under a framework that promoted peace than to let it spread chaotically. 147 civilizations signed the Railgun Proliferation Treaty. Human engineers traveled across the galaxy to teach others the simple principles of electromagnetic acceleration. They showed species how to build their own platforms, how to manufacture their own projectiles, how to create defensive grids around their homeworlds. A year later, Jiwon stood on the observation deck of the UNS Horizon, the same ship where she had watched the first test fire. Chief Engineer Daeho joined her. Both of them watched Earth slowly rotating below. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Daeho asked. "That a weapons test would fundamentally reshape galactic politics?" Jiwon smiled. "We did not invent anything revolutionary. Humans have understood kinetic weapons for thousands of years. We just reminded the galaxy of something they had forgotten." "What's that?" "That the best weapon is not the most powerful or the most sophisticated. It is the one you can build fast enough and cheap enough that fighting you becomes a losing proposition for your enemy." Below them, Earth continued its eternal rotation, home to a species that had accidentally ended the age of galactic conquest. Not through superior firepower, but through simple economics. The galaxy would never be the same. Wars would still happen. That was the nature of intelligent beings. But they would be smaller, shorter, and far more costly for aggressors. Because now every species could afford the ultimate deterrent, a weapon so simple, so inexpensive, and so devastating that the only way to win was not to fight at all. The railgun had become the great equalizer. It made the weak strong enough to defend themselves. It made the strong think twice before attacking. It made conquest economically irrational. Humanity's first railgun had spoken, and in its wake came something the galaxy had not seen in millions of years: genuine balance, not enforced by a hegemonic power, but maintained by mutual understanding that aggression was simply no longer profitable. It was not perfect peace, but it was close enough. And for a galaxy that had known endless cycles of conquest and subjugation, close enough was revolutionary. Close enough was a new beginning. Close enough was hope.